I'm designing my factory and building my factory in a live, digitalized 3D model of my facility. My facility is not just in the four walls of my factory in East Hartford. My product goes through multiple factories in multiple states in multiple countries. So my value stream isn't isolated. My value stream is very complex and it's very expansive. So I have parts that come in from different countries. I have machining processes that I do in certain states and in certain areas because we have the experts, right, that don't all reside in one place. So I had the 3D model of my engine. I have the 3D model of how I'm manufacturing that engine and how my manufacturing process looks. And then I have a 3D model of my material flow. So how is my material flowing through that factory? And my material is not just the part that I'm making. My material is everything that I need to support the manufacture of that part. So that is my tooling, right? That is my details. If you look at material flow through your factory, how can you optimize making a part if you have absolutely no visibility into the tooling availability and readiness? How can you optimize your manufacturing process if you have no idea what your consumables are and if you have enough and if they're ready, right? So what we wanted to do was we wanted to digitalize our engine. So we have a 3D model of our engine. We have a 3D model of our manufacturing environment. We have a 3D model of our material flow, which is internal and external logistics. Most people, when you think about product moving through a manufacturing facility, we think machines. If you're thinking machines, you're limiting your thinking. Because I have, just in one factory alone, 1.5 million square feet. I have over 800 inventory locations that I store material, and none of it's on a machine. Machine's only used for manufacturing. So the internal logistics is that material visibility of where your material is when it's not on a machine. How many of you have a problem with going out and trying to find where parts are in the process? It's supposed to be at this step of the process, but it's not there. Because most of us, if we have the old way of doing business, my operator makes a part, finishes a part, he stamps that he did it, it automatically advances to the next step of the process, but that next step of the process could be in a different building, it could be in a different cell, it could be in a different work loop, it could be in a different state. How do you get visibility into that? So I wanted to get visibility, true visibility, to all my material, whether it's internal or external. Because now if I'm transferring it to a different building, if I'm transferring it to a vendor to do another step of the machining process, I need to have visibility into that. Because at any point in time in my value stream, if something happens to man, method, material, machine, I have to adjust and I have to react. And I want to be able to adjust and react by getting visibility into what's happening. So currently, right, the current state is something happens in a machine in Pennsylvania. I have no idea. They make an independent silo decision on what to do based on that machine going down. They can't run a specific part number. They can't complete a specific process. Do they just shut down and go home? No, they make an independent decision to say, this is the next best thing for me to do, right? And then I don't know the impact of that decision until a week later when I run a report and I get it in Excel and it tells me that that machine was down for 2 days and they didn't run these parts and they ran these parts instead, which now starved my factory in Europe. How do you recover? Now it's going to take me 3 weeks to recover from a one-day incident that I had no visibility to. So I need complete visibility to all my internal and external logistics. So I designed my engine. I manufactured my engine. Now I release my engine to the field, right? So now it's in service. And it comes in for its first inspection or its first overhaul. And now I'm going to get data from that inspection and that overhaul. And that data is going to tell me that something is or is not performing as designed. So let's say hypothetically, because we have the best engine in the aerospace industry today, that hypothetically something didn't perform as designed. So I get data fed from my aftermarket, my overhaul repair facilities, that tells me this part didn't perform as designed. I want that live data feed to come back to my quality group so I can do population bounding and I can understand risk. I want it to live feed to my engineering group real time so they can understand what the disposition of that is and the impact it has on the life cycle of that part, right? And they're going to do that by looking at the 3D model of that engine in order to do a risk evaluation and understand what the impact of that is. And then they can send it to the design group, which has the real-time access to the 3D model of that engine. They can real-time look at it and inspect it and make real-time quick decisions as opposed to current lagging decisions. So if you look at the example that I gave you, how long do you think it takes today once I find out that I've got a problem in the field, or the field identifies they have an issue, before it gets back to me and I understand the full scope of the value stream? Do you think it's days? Do you think it's weeks? I would hope, maybe. I can tell you right now it's not within a few hours because my systems aren't connected. I have absolutely no visibility into that. If you think it's a phone call, well, Kim, I told you, right? So I can get told that there's a problem in aftermarket, but how do I understand the impact of my value stream? I can't see my value stream, right? So once I can connect my value stream, I can not only see the impact of that, now I can optimize around it, right? So optimizing around my value stream is now I can do real-time what-if scenarios. Instead of making a decision and then running a report a week later because my KPI isn't the right real-time KPI, I find out a week after I made a decision that that maybe wasn't the best decision. And I didn't fully appreciate the impact on the value stream. Right? So I want that to all be connected. I want to understand what it is real time, so I can now make real time informed decisions. And I can also run what if scenarios. What if I did this? Oh, Kim, that's not a good idea. If you did this, it's going to impact these KPIs this way, and that's probably not the best decision. So it'll stop me from making bad decisions because I can run multiple what if scenarios. I can understand the risk and the impact, and then I can make an informed decision. So that's how I am aligning my digital transformation journey from a strategy standpoint to get that all connected. So it sounds like I'm boiling the ocean, right? But when you develop your strategy should be what gets you from cradle to grave. And then you go after those one small chunks, right? Those small bites of the elephant. So my digital transformation journey is going to connect my entire value stream. But where am I starting? And how do I pick where to start? I'm starting in my mod center. I'm starting from a manufacturing standpoint because the first thing I need to do is get visibility into my manufacturing environment. Right? I want to see what my process is doing. I want to see how my material is flowing because only then can I start to optimize around it. Right? Once I get visibility into my factory and how my factory is performing, and I can start to understand capacity and constraints, and I can start to mitigate risk, then I can start optimizing around it. Once I start optimizing around it, then I can start flowing out the other steps of connecting that value stream. So I have an overall digital journey strategy, and I'm starting with visibility into the factory, material visibility, and machine connectivity. So with each of us, the digital transformation puzzle is different. Every one of our puzzles looks different, but I would argue that the puzzle pieces should all go together the same. So it might be different colors, they might be different sizes, it might be different from a scale standpoint, but it should all be the same at the end of the day. We should have our puzzle pieces that all fit and align, and that puzzle is what it is that you defined from your digital transformation strategy. So as I was developing the strategy, I wanted to make sure that I understood what all the puzzle pieces were so I could start with an implementation plan. So the puzzle pieces that I defined for my transformation strategy was focused on process, because you have to define the process before you can capitalize on technology. So the first thing I needed to do was get an appreciation of my process. What did my process look like? What was my current state? So that goes back to the conversation earlier that we had about maturity assessments, right? So my process, when I looked at my process, it's manual. How many have manual processes? I should see lots of hands. Right? It's very labor intensive. How many have processes that are very labor intensive that require lots of manual operator input or interaction? I should see lots of hands. Because that's where we are today, right? And then lack of visibility. How many have no idea what's doing until you run a report or until someone tells you? And it's typically not the same hour, it's not the same day, and sometimes it's not the same week. Lack of visibility, right? So we all, regardless of industry, regardless of size and scale of your company, we all have the same process limitations and gaps, right? So I looked at my process. And then after I looked at my process, I looked at the technology, right? What is the technology that's supporting my process? So if you look at the technology that I have a lot of different processes, and I have a lot of different solutions that support parts of the process, but really not a holistic approach to it, right? So if you look at where we've come from and where we've come to, whenever you have an issue, you independently go and try to solve that issue. So historically, what we've done is we've had an issue, we went and found a solution to support the issue. Or we got a solution to support an issue which created 5 more issues, right? So now we have to go and try to find another solution which then created more issues. So a lot of independent siloed point solutions solved independent issues which then created more issues across the value stream. Most of the issues that we went to solve, we went and looked for solutions that were small solutions that were very niche products that solved just that one piece of the puzzle, right? But it didn't solve the bigger picture and it didn't help you collectively. So then you look at the system-driven constrained processes. So when you get a system and the system is not fully in line with the way that you currently do business or the way that you should be doing business, what happens is the system drives a constraint. The system drives a workaround. How many of you have systems that you pull and extract data from and then manipulate that data in a spreadsheet? I should see lots of hands. Everybody is managing their business today in this room, I guarantee it, on a spreadsheet. If you're not, we should talk because I need lessons learned. Right? So the reason that we're all managing our business on a spreadsheet is because the systems that we have are significantly constraining the way I do business. They're significantly constraining what it is that I need to do in order to manage my business. So if you go back to one of the comments that I heard earlier was highly customized, right? Highly customized is a bad thing. If you customize your systems, when you customize systems, right, you're creating more constraints and more workarounds. Software of today is not customized. It's highly configured. And that highly configured software is continuous improvement, self-learning software. So it doesn't need to be customized, right? It's already configured to do 80% of what you need done. You just don't know what you need to do. And what we historically do is we take our constrained process and all of these crazy workarounds and we try to force it into a new system. So all you did was take a constrained bad process and put it into a system, so now you have an automated constrained bad process, right? So you have to redefine the way it is that you do business in order to capitalize on the technology. And the technology needs to be configured in a way that it supports the business requirement, not the other way around. You don't want to buy a solution and then force the business to figure out how to use it, because chances are when you do that, you do it wrong. That goes back to you buy a car, you give it to a 10-year-old. 10-year-old's not going to be able to drive the car. Now you got to have workarounds because you got a car, but you can't use it, right? But you just signed a long-term agreement and you spent a lot of money, so you got to do something with it. So now you turn your car into a playhouse. That's a constraint, right? Focus on the business. Let the business drive the solution. And then people, right? So you look at our manufacturing environment and where we've transitioned from historically, right? So we have a lot of highly skilled people in the workforce today. And those highly skilled people in the workforce today are going to be leaving the workforce in the very near future, right? Because they're going to be retiring. So we're going to have a natural attrition rate. So the people that have been in the industry for 40 years and the skill set of the people that are coming into the industry, are they equivalent? No. You got guys that can build CNC machines, right? That can code CNC machines that have been doing it for years. You get the new kids that come in, right? Do they understand all of that? No. But they're very good at the coding piece, right? So we have to understand and look at the cultural differences and the generational differences of our workforce, especially from a manufacturing environment. So we talk about getting real-time visibility to data. We talk about automating processes, right, and going digital. What does that do with the guy that doesn't even have a flip phone? How comfortable do you think he is with the digital transformation journey? He's not very comfortable at all, right? How does he get ownership into that digital transformation journey? How does he become a digital innovator? How does he become the future of manufacturing? Does anybody know the answer to that? I don't. Right? But that's where the change management and the culture piece comes in, right? So as you develop your digital transformation strategy, you also now have to think about developing, I'm changing the way I'm doing business and I'm changing my processes. I'm changing the way that I get solutions that support that process. How does that impact the people? Because they're the ones that are going to be the most impacted. They're the ones that are going to be using it. They're the ones that are the key contributors and the key influencers into the success of your strategy and the success of your plan. So you can come up with the best plans in the world. If you have no one to execute that plan, how successful is that plan, no matter how great it is? It's going to fail. So you have to address the people and the culture piece of it. So, the technology puzzle. Looking at the technology puzzle piece, right? Breaking it down into small bite-sized chunks. Technology requires a significant amount of investment. If you look at companies that have all of these legacy systems, right? We go back to the Frogger. They have multiple legacy stacked systems. What kind of investment and risk is that for them to come in and disrupt all of that and get rid of those systems to come up with one optimized system that supports the entire value stream instead of 55 different niche systems that support only certain pieces of the value stream? That's very scary, right? That's going to cause a significant amount of investment and a significant amount of disruption. Typically, the technology piece is IT-driven, and typically it's top-down, right? How many of us have experienced, here we've got a new software solution and we're implementing it, and here business, come in and help us test it, but they already bought it, right? There should be a lot of hands, right? Because that's the way it's always been, right? IT has always been the thing behind the black curtain that most of us didn't understand, right? So we relied on IT to do IT things because we didn't know what IT things were. And IT things for IT is to buy the shiny red ball. What if you don't need a shiny red ball? Right? So the puzzle piece you have to understand is the natural divide between operations and IT. You've got to have a plan to fix that. You've got to have a plan to get the IT organization to understand what your business requirements are. That way you don't get the wrong solution, and now you're back to square one with a constrained process. How many of us have had a history of difficult implementations with new software programs? How many of us were sold a bill of goods? Right? So now there's that inherent culture piece that says every time IT gives me a computer system, It's a horrible implementation. I can't deliver parts for 3 weeks, and I lose all this money, and they tell me it's going to do all these things, and it never does. Why does it never do all the things it's supposed to do that they tell you? Because it wasn't driven by the business requirement. Your business requirements have got to drive the solutions that support it, right? So no longer can we have a puzzle piece that is top down, buy the next best thing, right? It's got to be process driven. And then it's very people dependent. So when you get new software and when you get new technology, how much does it disrupt the factory? How much does it disrupt production? It disrupts it a lot, right? Because they come to you and they say, I need 10 people. Or they release something and you have to stop doing what you're doing in order to try to support it or try to use it. And then once it's launched, the system goes down or there's a glitch, right? So now you have people scrambling, right? So it's very disruptive and it's very people dependent. So that was the first step that I looked at and the issues that I identified from a technology piece, because as I develop my roadmap and my strategy going forward, I need to make sure that I address all those so I have the right puzzle piece. So then you look at the process puzzle, right? So the process puzzle, right, I have historical success. I've always done it this way and it's worked great. But historical success can hinder continuous improvement. If you've done the same thing for 3 years, you should probably look at redoing it. If you've done the same thing for 5 years, you should probably look at redesigning it. If you've done the same thing for 7 years, you should throw it away and start over. How many of us have been doing the same thing for 7 years and thinks it's great because it's always worked? Right? But guess what? Business is changing. And it's changing at a very rapid pace. And if you're not changing with it, and if you're not continuously optimizing, right, then you're always going to do what you always did, and you're always going to get what you always got. So don't let historical success hinder continuous improvement. What you did yesterday might have been great yesterday, but it's not good enough for today. And that's what the digital transformation journey is telling us. What we did yesterday is most certainly not good enough for today or tomorrow. And then tribal knowledge. For those of us that have all of those experts that have been in the industry and on the factory floor and in manufacturing for 40 years, how much of that is written down? How much of that is readily available where I can go and access all of that knowledge and all of that data so I can troubleshoot and problem solve with the best of them? How many of us have that? There's more tribal knowledge on the factory floor than we think, right? So understanding what that is and capturing it is a definite critical puzzle piece that I need as I build my going forward strategy. And then people dependent. I have a lot of processes that are people dependent. And it's not just a manufacturing process that's people dependent. My production support is very people dependent, right? So my production manager on the factory floor, very people dependent. I have 15 of them running around with spreadsheets trying to figure out what to do next because everything's going wrong all at the same time, right? Very people dependent. Quality, very people dependent. Inspectors, very people dependent, right? So I have a lot of manual processes, not just from a production standpoint, but from a business support standpoint. And how do you identify what all of those people-dependent processes are? And then how can you automate around those processes? And how do you define your strategy to redefine what it is that they do? So instead of having someone on the factory floor with a spreadsheet running around chasing parts and counting parts, what if they have a tablet that's telling them real time where the parts are? So now they're simply optimizing and making sure material is staged where it's supposed to be, right? So their job isn't necessarily going away. It's just significantly changed, right? So you need to understand what that people dependency is in order to develop that roadmap and that strategy to have the right puzzle piece for that. Again, we go back to the history of difficult implementations, right? How many of us have lean manufacturing Kaizen events or dives that tell us how to solve a problem? And then we come up with a 15-page Kaizen newspaper of actions with 45 people to go and fix the problem. And then they see it through to completion, and it actually fixed the problem because you did the verify and you ensured that it all worked. None of us, right? We all have very good intentions, but it just doesn't work that way, right? So if you look at the history of difficult implementations, we have these process redesigns and we do these dives and we try to refine and redesign our process. But what it ends up doing is it just ends up giving a small incremental change that really wasn't worth the time and the effort that we put into it, right? So now we're hesitant and we're resistant to continue to do that. So we need to recognize that, right? And we need to make sure that my roadmap addresses that. So now when I have that real-time data and that information that tells me how to set up my factory and how my factory is running and how to optimize my process, I can address that difficult implementation, right? And then I look at exponential change. So small incremental improvements versus exponential change. How many think exponential change is easy when it comes to process redesign? It's very difficult, which is why we don't do it, right? Let's address the problem, let's throw a Band-Aid on it, and let's get to delivering parts. Because that's what we get paid to do, right? We got to deliver parts. That's what I'm measured against, my ability to deliver parts. Not my ability to do a complete process redesign, do exponential change in order to deliver parts. But newsflash, digital transformation is exponential change. And we need to recognize that exponential change because it doesn't happen overnight. It's not a 2-day Kaizen event. It's a 2-month endeavor or a 3-month endeavor, depending on what it is that you're looking at, to fully understand and appreciate it and redesign that process. So what does that puzzle piece look like? Because that's going to impact your implementation plan, schedule, and budget. Solving the puzzle. So if you look at what I just discussed, what is it that you see that's inherently the same, right? Whether it's technology or process, they both have a history of difficult implementation, right? A history of significant challenges. And they have a history of being very people dependent. So we have significant challenges and they're very people dependent. In your digital transformation journey, if you don't address challenges and people dependency, you're doing it wrong. You can't design a process and then expect the people to use the process. If the process is people dependent, if the success or failure of that implementation is people dependent, what's the first thing you need to address? People, right? You need to address the people. You have to have the people on board. You have to have them bought in. You have to have them understanding the vision. You have to have them as owners of that strategy, right? You want everybody on your factory floor saying, I am a digital innovator. I am the future of manufacturing. If you don't have everybody on your factory floor saying, I am, then you're doing it wrong. And you are going to be significantly challenged with success and implementation. So you have to make sure that you address that puzzle piece. How do you address that puzzle piece? You have to have a change management strategy. It does you no good to have a digital transformation strategy without a change management strategy that starts the process up front. So I need to have a vision. What is Industry 4.0? What does that mean to me? How do I fit into the puzzle? What does that strategy look like? And now I'm going to develop a communication plan. And my communication plan is going to be directly aligned with my human capital investment and my change management plan, right? The reason it's called human capital is because you have to invest in your resources just as much as you invest in your machine, just as much as you invest in your facilities. That's why it's called capital, right? So you have to address the human capital piece. You have to have an aligned communication and change management plan and strategy as you embark on your digital transformation journey. If you're already on the journey and you don't have a digital transformation or a change management plan, and a communication strategy that's already been launched, you need to start over because you're at risk. So understand your change management strategy. Get your communication plan aligned around your change management strategy. Start that human capital investment. Start positively influencing the culture of the environment. And that in culture is the environment of your operators. It's the environment of your mid-level supervisors. It's the environment of your managers. And it most certainly is the environment of your senior leaders. Because if you don't have all four of those aligned and saying exactly the same thing and marching exactly in the same direction, you're going to be significantly challenged, and you're probably going to be set back a lot as you go through your digital transformation journey, right? So get your communication plan, your change management plan, your communication strategy aligned, and make sure it covers all the four levels of your organizational structure from a leadership and people standpoint. So that brings us to, it is critical to understand, right, that you have to first bring together the people. Then you can redefine, redesign, and re-engineer the process in order to capitalize on technology. So technology is not transforming, right? Technology is transformed. We have to catch up. And the only way we can catch up is to align the people and the process in order to capitalize it. So if you have one takeaway from the change management piece, this is what I'd like you to take away. Change the people, change the process, capitalize on technology. So, develop your change management and communication strategy, right? Involve all levels of the organization, jointly, every step of the way. You can't just have a targeted approach. I'm going to start with the operators, or I'll start with the executives. You've got to have a line strategy that starts with all of them all at the same time. And then understand that operations own the requirement, right? We're the subject matter experts. We're the ones that make the parts. We're the ones that own the process. We don't want to rely on someone else to understand or to be able to relay or translate my requirement or tell me what my requirement is. How many wants to be told what their requirement is? I want to own my requirement. I want to own my future, and I want to own my success, right? So I'm the subject matter expert of my manufacturing environment. So I'm going to re-engineer my process. I'm going to own what my future state looks like, and I'm going to make sure that IT supports that future state with the right technology, right? Because those of us that don't think that the younger generation knows what technology best supports what it is that they need, you're sadly mistaken. The younger generation probably knows more about IT and the technology and the software out there than IT does, right? Own the problem, own the solution. Hopefully, those of you that have started your digital transformation journey have addressed the change management and human capital piece of it. And if you haven't, it's time to start. And with that, I'll open it up to questions. So what we did was we identified the holistic approach, and then we're going at it in phases, right? So we're taking the as-built as phase one, and then we're expanding from the as-built. Now, that might be a strategy that would be different depending on your industry, depending on where you fit in the value stream, and depending on what your pain points are. So we as an organization decided to start with the as-built and expand out. And again, depending on your pain points, you can pick to start with as designed, right? It all depends. Now, I can tell you that my project has started with as built. However, we do have parallel, right? Because Kim can't run everything, so we do have subject matter experts that are out understanding what those other phases are, and then how we collectively get together and feed each other and work to the same solution. So while there are currently independent activities in different phases, we're working towards the same approach.
What was the rampant time in terms of developing the human capital side and getting them on board with this before you could actually begin the transformation process? And where are you in the transformation process?
So that's a very good question. So the reason why we wanted to address change management and human capital investment, because it's a lesson learned for me. So I'm up here today sharing my change management critical cog or critical puzzle piece, because I didn't fully appreciate that as I put my strategy together. So now I'm recovering. But what I don't want anybody in this room to do, right, is have to recover. I want you to take the lessons learned, and that's why we're all here, to network, to learn who's advancing in the industry and how they're advancing, and to share those lessons learned, right? So we can help each other advance, and we don't want to see the same mistakes made, right, through the process. So we've recognized the need for the change management and the human capital investment and to align the communication strategy. So we have since aligned our communication strategy and working our change management plan, and we're in the process of implementation.
In terms of human capital and educating the all individuals, what specifically did you use to educate them? Because it starts at the very bottom on one hand.
Right, absolutely. So I'm not sure if you heard the I am, right? So we wanted to start with ownership. We all are responsible for our future and what our future looks like, right? So we started at the very bottom and we worked our way up. So I am a digital innovator. Every operator on the factory floor that has an idea or a key input into the blueprinting or the roadmap, right, gets recognized with an I am recognition, right? So everybody wants to be the I am, and everybody wants that visible recognition that they own their process, right? They own their future, and they are all digital innovators whether they know it or not, right? So we started with the ownership of the operators, and then we built that tie-in strategy from a communication standpoint to level load it across the organization from the bottom up to the top down. I'm not sure how I'm doing on time. I might have gone over. So with that, I will thank everybody for your time. And again, I'll be available to answer any questions.